Trump could offer to join BRICS?
Uh, you know, I suspect that we might see that happen in reality. Somebody said this, and I think it's an excellent metaphor. They said, You're always invited as a polite guest at the banquet." And I think that Trump's strategy probably will be to accept that invitation in some way when, when it becomes politically acceptable. And I think that might happen faster than we assume today. A lot of things are now unthinkable after 4 years of Biden. I think it's so clouded our minds that it's hard to imagine how things could be different, but things could be very different.
You're watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny. Today's guest is fan favorite Alex Krainer. Alex, thank you so much for coming back on the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Danny. Good to join you again, and greetings to all your viewers and listeners.
Yeah, well, we are here talking to you on Inauguration Day. So I usually open up by asking the question, what is most topical to you? I can kind of presume what is most topical to you right now, but I'm going to let you take it away. I'm presuming it's the inauguration and the beginning of the Trump presidency.
Yes, of course. I think it's the ending of an era, and it's the beginning of a different era. I think we probably got a little bit inured to 4 years of Trump, to the nonsense, to the uh, constant assaults from all sides, globally and domestically. And it's hard to even remember what normal life is like. And, you know, 4 years ago, we were still in the grips of the COVID pandemic. And then so much stuff rolled off of that. And I remember 3 years ago, I went to a conference in Baku, Azerbaijan. It was a Eurasian Integrations Conference. And there were a bunch of Europeans there, but mostly there were people from the Middle East, Russia, not Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Belarus, India, China, the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me is what a contrast that was with the everyday reality I got used to in the West. Because this conference, there was no talk about climate change, pandemic, uh, social distancing, um, none of that. None of the, social justice nonsense, none of the LGBT nonsense. It was just talk about normal things, about investments in infrastructure, developing trade, developing, constructive bilateral relationships between nations and so on. And I thought, oh my gosh, I almost forgot about this. Because in the West, it's all been turned into like a hall of mirrors, like a hysteria,
Mm-hmm.
like a dog chasing their tails and becoming oblivious to the whole rest of the world. And so it was very refreshing. And then I wrote an article about this. And then the feedback from that article was, a lot of people said like, "Oh my God, yeah, that's right. This is, like we're living in an insane world." And then it just continued getting worse and worse and worse. And it's been 4 years of us telling ourselves, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, then it did. And it's been that same trajectory 4 years uh, up until just today, no? Wasn't it just today that Biden signed uh, preemptive pardons for people who haven't even been charged with
For
anything?
Fauci and Mark
Like,
Milley.
yeah, and all of the January 6th committee. the Politburo that was running the January 6th
So that's a very
investigation.
interesting thing you bring up here because like if I'm Fauci now, can I just do any crime I want to and just have this blanket pardon over me? Like if I'm Mark Milley, can I just commit murder now and like get away with it?
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. Exactly the point. And I think, I don't know if this is even valid. I mean, can a president issue a pardon for somebody who hasn't even been charged with a crime? So, I mean, a blank check essentially, like whatever you did, maybe you were children, maybe you committed war crimes, maybe you attacked millions of people with a biological agent. Here's a get out of jail free card for forever. So you've no fear, like if you commit a crime for the ruling establishment, you're above the law. From the same party that, I mean, never tired of saying like nobody's above the law, right? Anyway, so and then on the geopolitical plane, there was, the thing in Ukraine started practically from the day Joe Biden walked into the White House. It was, uh, I think, on day 12 of his presidency, he calls up Volodymyr Zelensky, who has been elected in 2019 on a platform of normalizing relations with Russia, of peace with Eastern Ukraine, with the Donbass, with re-legalizing Russian language. He promised he would never take any television networks off the air. The day after he spoke with Joe Biden, he takes off three opposition television networks off the air. Zelensky in Ukraine, right? Mr. Democracy and Human Rights. And he bans the biggest opposition party, by this time, it was the party, I forget the party's name, but the leader was Viktor Medvedchuk. And Viktor Medvedchuk was then by far the most popular politicians in Ukraine. So he outright bans the party. No mas, can't be in politics anymore. And then 2 weeks later, Zelensky actually arrests Medvedchuk and puts him behind bars. And so that all started just as Joe Biden walked into the White House and took over. And so it's been, and then, not to mention, these 4 years have been 4 years of strange natural disasters and strangely no response or completely inadequate responses from FEMA and from the authorities. And then LGBT ideology has been absolutely turbocharged. Um, it's been a total assault domestically and abroad. And I think that if the administration's objective was to set the world on fire, they couldn't have done a worse job or a better job. I don't know. It's really been an arsonist junta. And I call them the junta because they stole the election. I mean, I think that everybody knows that. I hope that during Trump's next 4 years, this will be established and enshrined that the 4 years under Biden have been stolen, that it was an imposter regime. And so, today marks the end of this regime. And I think that if you put a statue in the White House, that it couldn't possibly do a worse job. So I feel very optimistic about the turn that the world takes today, because we're not just talking about the United States, we're talking about the world, because what happens in the United States affects everybody else everywhere around the world. And we've seen that, for whatever it's worth, the situation for the Palestinians in Gaza has improved. Humanitarian aid finally came through. The shootings, the shooting has stopped. The ceasefire is in place, um, and the exchange of hostages and prisoners is actually taking place. So, the Palestinians feel like they won, and Israel finally started raining death on top of them. That's an improvement in my book. Now, there's a lot of people who are passionately devoted to the idea that, oh, this is all a scam, this is all make believe. Trump is controlled opposition. He's going to take up where Biden left, and this is all a deception. He wants to do this and this and that. I mean, there's people are very imaginative in interpreting all these things, but I actually think that uh, to a large extent, what Trump is doing is genuine, or at least to the extent that he can. Of course he will be sabotaged, and of course the other side will try to disable him and frustrate his efforts. But I believe that Trump will disengage from the United States being a global policeman, and I think that he will focus on domestic affairs because in the United States the economy is not in a great shape, infrastructure is not in a great shape, secure domestic securities domestic security is not in a great shape. So it's going to be a lot of work. Healthcare is not in great shape. Everything needs work. Everything needs improvement. But I'm very optimistic because even if Donald Trump himself and his administration are sabotaged and frustrated in their efforts, I think that just the ending of this dystopian regime under Biden is going to galvanize the American people to, to stand up and to get back to the business of, everyday living, of making improvements to their daily lives. And, you know, this gives me great hope because it's not just one man, one administration, it's the grassroots, and that can be a tsunami of change.
You did mention one of the big things coming out of the Trump administration that hasn't even been sworn in yet at the time of this recording is the Gaza ceasefire. When you look at the contrast of reactions between the two camps, the Israeli side seems of not a little bit, but very disappointed in the outcome. The Palestinians over there, they seem to be celebrating the outcome. What's your read on the situations? Who are the winners in this scenario? Granted, there are no real winners in this kind of conflict. How do you read this?
Well, Hamas is an insurgency, and an insurgency doesn't need to vanquish the other side to win. They just need to survive. And what we see now is that not only have they survived, they are stronger than they were at the beginning of the war. So, many people joined Hamas. Apparently, their ranks have swelled by 10 to 12,000. That shouldn't be surprising because so many Palestinians lost practically all their families. If you're a man who wanted to mind your own business, but now they killed your family, they killed your wife, your parents, your children, um, I think that your next inclination is to join the resistance, to join the insurgency. And they killed so many that there's no surprise there. But what we saw yesterday when the prisoner exchange took place is that Hamas fighters emerged from their underground shelters, from the tunnels. They look they look strong. They look, they don't. Let's say that if you can picture the last moments of Yahya Sinwar's struggle, He was he looked a mess. He was uh,
Disheveled, tired, you know,
tired, broken.
malnourished. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But these men came out like they just returned from a training camp. So, that's not an irrelevant sight. So, they've been fighting in the tunnels for about 16 months now. They've been underground. Uh, Food and water probably hasn't been available in very uh, abundant amounts. And so the fact that they're still there, that they're still fighting, that they look strong and intact is, I think it shows uh, a much greater resilience that anybody could have expected. And so, the Israelis, this is a defeat for them. This is a defeat for them because they were supposed to do away with Hamas in the space of about 2 to 3 weeks. This all got forgotten, but this is what the Israelis were talking about. And then, we know that Israeli generals and the military analysts were openly saying that the Israeli military is conceived for very short engagements. That their war has to be finished in a few weeks' time. That they cannot prevail if it drags out for months and months and months, which is what happened. And I think the ele the the angle that Israel so completely depends on the United States for their security, for their very existence, is now in jeopardy. It's now in very much in doubt because Donald Trump has given a few very strong signals that he is not ready to unconditionally support Israel. And one of the last things that I just saw on X, just minutes literally before we joined here, is that he invited to his inauguration or after the inauguration one of the rabbis of the Nature Carta, uh, who are they're Orthodox Jews. They're very numerous. They're very strongly represented in New York, but they're very anti-Zionist. And so, this struck me. I almost couldn't believe what I was reading. But that's another very strong signal, i.e., I support the Jews. I don't necessarily support Israel because these Nature Carta are very, very ardently anti-Zionist. They think that Israel must vanish from the face of the earth. And so, interesting times for sure. And for sure, radical changes are coming our way. It won't be boring.
What do you make of his pro-Israel cabinet, though? Is he, yes, he is kind of playing the, I guess, maximum pressure campaign against Netanyahu and the leadership there. But how do you square the circle when it comes to his staunchly pro-Israel cabinet with Hegseth, with Huckabee, etc.?
Well, he's the commander in chief. He's the president. He tells them how things are going to be. They don't tell him how things are going to be. Uh, I've been from the time he was elected. I've been suggesting that we shouldn't read too much into Trump's signaling. That is, how he declares himself on certain issues. And when it comes to Israel, it is so delicate. It is so explosive that you can come right out and have a balanced view to say, oh, we need a two-state solution. Oh, we need to respect Palestinians' human lives. Oh, you can't bomb them. And I think that some people even took issue with him saying that the killing has to stop. And he just said something today or yesterday. I again, it's the X feed that, you read it, but you don't necessarily register exactly on what occasion it was said. But he said that we have to give hope back to the Palestinian people. We have to uh, help them because otherwise there's going to be a rebellion. So, he's openly talking about giving a helping hand to the Palestinians. Now, what does that mean? I don't know yet. He's probably not talking about helping out Hamas. He's probably talking about Fatah or international peacekeepers going in there, international humanitarian organizations going in there. I don't know, but for sure, we have a much, much more balanced approach than what we had under Blinken and Sullivan, under Biden, but Biden barely knew where he was. So this was all driven by Blinken and Sullivan and the gang of neocons at the White House.
How do you see this playing out with Iran? Trump has said some very numerous hawkish things on Iran, and much to your point, the signaling that Trump makes isn't necessarily reflective of his true motivations. What are your views on his stance on Iran, and how do you think he'll kind of thread the needle there?
It's a very, very good question, Danny. And my gut feeling is that he will end up talking to the Iranians. He will end up cutting a deal with the Iranians. Uh, these ideas that he's going to launch an attack against Iran together with the Israelis, and that he's going to try to rally, the Saudis and all the other quote unquote allies in the region against Iran. I think that's unrealistic. I don't think that's going to happen. And uh, there's a few reasons why I think so. He already had an opportunity to attack Iran when the situation was far, far more favorable. And that was towards the end of 2019, after Iran had downed uh, one of the U.S. Air Force drones in the Persian Gulf. So the balance of power was much, much more favorable to the United States and Israel at the time. Uh, and the Iranians gave him a pretext. Had he launched this attack, it would have been accepted by the international community, and the British were lobbying very strongly to push Trump over the line to launch that attack. He declined for whatever reason. There's several explanations, but he declined. The fact is, he never launched the attack. Today, the situation is very, very different, and the balance of power is much more favorable to the Iranians. For one thing, they're no longer enemies with the Saudis. Second, the U.S. position in Iraq has weakened a lot. Third, today the Iranians have a comprehensive partnership and a de facto defense pact with the Russians, but also with the Chinese. Also, the Iranians have demonstrated the ability to defend their airspace and to deliver precision strikes at Israelis, but that means that they can, anywhere within the reach of their missiles, they can deliver accurate pinpoint strikes, including with hypersonic missiles. That in practice means that the only means of power projections in the region available to the Americans, which is the carrier strike groups, is simply not available anymore. So, short of launching a nuclear attack on Iran, and a pretty massive one at that, there's nothing that he can do. Even if he wanted to, he cannot. So I think that in this situation, there's a lot of downside and not very much upside at all. There is no upside whatsoever. There's no snowball snowball's chance in hell of winning against Iran if if he chose to launch an attack. So to my mind, there's no way that he's going to do it because not only is it a risky venture, it would also be an extremely costly venture. It would potentially cost the United States a lot of its naval assets, including aircraft carriers. You know, there's about 5,000 US soldiers on those aircraft carriers. So to me, it's a delusion to think that this is what he's planning. I think he's planning to roll back the imperial overstretch and to focus on domestic issues. And I think that with time, he's probably going to be cutting deals with the Russians, with the Iranians, with the Chinese, because, you know, there's a lot of good trade that could be had in that region, particularly if you wanted to have that trade on a fair and equitable basis. You know, you simply go there and you deal with the people on a basis that's mutually beneficial and acceptable to all sides. Well, I think that to Trump, this is much more attractive than being the global policeman and putting a gun on everybody's head and forcing them to do your bidding. I think that's how it's going to go.
How do you anticipate his handling of Syria, given the delicate situation there as well between Turkey, Israel, and the United States, and Syria too? So,
Uh, that's a great question. I'm not even sure. You know, they have Biden has left the most putrid possible mess he could have left to Donald Trump there. We have Lebanon, which has been kind of pushed in the way of in the direction of a civil war. We have Syria, which is already in some kind of a civil war. We have a you know, in the sense that there are now these factions that came into Syria, took over Syria with along with HTS. They're already fracturing. And the Syrian Arab Army hasn't vanished. There's still, you know, divisions that are very viable and intact, and they're already fighting the jihadis. Uh, Iran is still the you know the elephant in the region with the dominant power with you know what do they call that escalatory dominance in the region. Um, Israel is overstretched. The alliance of the United States with Turkey is very strained because the US ally in the region are the Kurds. But the Kurds are enemies with the Turks. And so there's already military clashes between Turkey and the Kurds. And at the same time, uh, the United States is allied both with Turkey nominally and with the Kurds. But now this alliance between with Turks, which are the strongest military power in the region, it's very strained. And now, you know, the United States is upgrading the nuclear bombs that they have stored at Incirlik air base in Turkey. They have about 50 tactical nuclear bombs there, and the Turks in the you know in the Turkish media, this is being interpreted as Turkey becoming potentially a target of the United States nuclear attack. It's completely insane. So, how do you clean up the mess in Syria? I think that it's almost like quicksand. The harder you try, the faster you're going to sink. And so I would expect that Trump's team is going to try to take the light approach. Um, they're going to have to overtly be defensive of Israel, But I think that at the same time, there is no avoiding Israel having to, the resolution of the Israeli problem will have to go in the direction of a one-state solution. Two-state solution is finished. I don't think they can resurrect that one. And what one state solution entails is that Israel is going to have to become a different country, not a Jewish theocratic state, but a maybe a modern democratic state in which Jews and Muslims and Christians are going to enjoy equal rights. Well, that would be perhaps okay for people living there. That would maybe give a hopeful future to, you know, everybody in the region, longer term. But it would be the end of the Zionist project. And so, you know, I think there's going to be a kind of a dilemma between protecting the Jewish people in the region and defending them against retribution, against revenge, uh, and defending the Zionist project. And I think that it, I think that the Zionist project no longer has the future, and I think that whatever Trump and his team do, they won't be able to change this fact. So it's hard to say because you're right. The people on his team are ardent Zionists, a lot of them, or pretty much most of them. Uh, but again, I question the sincerity of that in some of them because again, it's the signaling. You can't, in the American politics, you can't come out and say, "Oh well, I'm gonna take a balanced approach on this issue," because then everybody remembers what happened to Jeremy Corbyn in the United Kingdom. He's been politically completely disenfranchised and labeled an anti-Semite for trying to have a balanced approach to this problem.
How do you view Turkey's role in Syria and some of the rhetoric that's been spewing against Israel? You hear a lot of this red meat being thrown by Erdogan last year during the beginning of the crisis there. And you've heard it recently as well coming from Erdogan's son that we will march to Jerusalem. Is this for real or is this just red meat to the population? Because as you well know, there are economic ties between Turkey and Israel. There's a mutual beneficial agreement there between Turkey does send oil over to Israel. What's your reading on that?
I think it's very real, but it's probably not realistic in the short term. So the inclination in a large part of the Turkish, political establishment is, hey, maybe we can recreate the glory of the former Ottoman Empire in some way here. We can take advantage of this, claim parts of Syria, claim, Turkey used to dominate that whole region, including Palestine. And so I think as things stand today, they actually have an opportunity to make that happen. And what is clear from the events on the ground is that Turkey has the greatest influence on HTS, which is, the government in Syria for all practical purposes. And that the HTS responds to, orders from the Turks, from Turkish intelligence and military circles. So I think that their intent to reoccupy what were former Ottoman possessions is probably real. Uh, Whether they will be able to pull it off remains to be seen. But to them, it's probably in terms of legacy of all these politicians like Erdogan, this is almost irresistible. And so I wouldn't dismiss these, like because when Erdogan's son says this is probably something that he discussed, around the dinner table with his dad, with other people in Turkish politics. This is, these are the types of statements that reveal the mindset in the power circles. And obviously, the Israelis have taken this extremely seriously, and they have now upgraded Turkey as their number one most dangerous existential enemy in the region, and they relegated the Iranians to number two. So,
Interesting.
it's been, yeah, yeah, it's a very, very serious thing, and we haven't seen the end of it. This is only just the beginning of what's going on. And at the same time, it's not clear to me what the relationship is between Turkey and Russia, Turkey and Iran, Turkey and China, whether this whole project of Turkey reassuming the position of the former Ottoman Empire in some form isn't actually being given a green light by the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese. And the reason why I suspect this is because uh, they they all obviously want to pacify the region, and they want to undo the British geopolitics of divide and rule, of creating these entities like Israel, that are then keeping the whole region constantly destabilized, constantly at war. Um, so, dividing the whole region between, let's say, hegemons like Turkey, Iran, um, Saudi Arabia, could be a way to simply pacify the region, to remove all these crisis flashpoints that the Western intelligence and Western secret diplomacy has been able to use for over a century to keep the whole region, well, the whole south of the Eurasian continent, almost constantly, uh, either in a Cold War or in actual kinetic wars.
Hey guys, quick pause. As you know, we are big proponents of physical gold and silver on this channel. However, the conundrum often arises, where do you put it? Do you put it in an above ground safe where it becomes a target for burglars, intruders, etc.? Or do you bury it underground? This is where Dirty Man's Safe comes in. This is a very simplified solution if you want to bury your gold or silver, or actually any valuables underground, whether it be alternative car keys, house keys, paperwork, legal documents, anything that's important to you, you can put in this bad boy right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at how it works. All right, so you're going to start off by digging a hole underground, sticking the tubular module in with the safe inside. You bury your valuables, and then whenever you want to extract it, boom, there it is. There's a string attachment. You just pull it out. Bada bing, bada boom. Check it out here. You have three different sizes: the girl safe, the man safe, and the old man safe, depending on how much you want to store in this thing. It's all about distribution. You want to diversify where you put your valuables. You don't want to just put them all in one place. And for more information, also click the link down below. All right, guys, let's get back to the video. Staying on topic with the Eurasian continent, we did see a tweet from, or a Truth Social post, I should say, from Donald Trump saying that he wants peace. He wants to create a situation where we have world peace in conjunction with China. Now, you did mention the Russia, China, Iran, essentially the BRICS alliance here. I'm going to throw you a curveball here, Alex. What is the range of possibilities that Trump could offer to join BRICS?
Uh, you know, I suspect that we might see that happen in reality because, the BRICS is now more than half of the world's population. Uh, the, you know, the Eurasian continent is something like 70% of the world's population, about as much of the global energy reserves. It, it's more than, it's close to that much of the world's GDP in purchasing power terms. Uh, it's a very, very big place, and it's a thriving place. It's Eurasian continent is in full swing of economic development. Hundreds of millions of people are being added to the ranks of the quote unquote affluent people, meaning, people who work and have money to spend. For the American enterprise, for the particularly small and medium-sized enterprise, this would be a very, very attractive prize, except you're not going to be able to do business with them on a if you try to force your way in, as a global cop who puts a gun to people's heads and say you're going to do what I tell you. That's over. But somebody said this, and I think it's an excellent metaphor. They said, You're always invited as a polite guest at the banquet." And I think that Trump's strategy probably will be to accept that invitation in some way when it becomes politically acceptable. And I think that might happen faster than we assume today. A lot of things are now unthinkable after 4 years of Biden. I think it's so clouded our minds that it's hard to imagine how things could be different, but things could be very different. And I think that, okay, taking the whole big picture into consideration, the United States has a very, very big problem, and that is the problem of the massive debt overhang, which is ultimately going to end up causing a reacceleration of inflation. So the economic policy is going to be probably the biggest challenge for the Trump administration, and it's also going to be his Achilles heel. To rekindle the economic the economic growth machine, you need to stimulate small and medium-sized enterprise, because that's absolutely the engine of innovation. That's where you're going to get 70 or 80% of the employment. And so you have to create conditions to stimulate, entrepreneurship from the ground up, small and medium-sized enterprise. And then, you need to give them markets, right? And in the United States, the consumer is tapped out. Everybody's got their credit cards maxed out. You need to have access to export markets. And so where are you going to look to for that? To the Eurasian continent, to China, to India, to Russia, to the Middle Eastern region, and so forth. So I think that the kind of deal making that Trump is going to be interested in, and I think it's almost a non-brainer, is to go and make peace and to go and accept the invitation to the banquet as a polite guest rather than the bully. I think that's going to be the turn of the American foreign policy in conjunction with the economic policy. I think it all kind of works together.
If it does lean that way, where does that leave Europe? Where does that leave Canada? Where does that leave the rest of the Western sphere? If the U.S. gets closer to BRICS in that sense.
Europe out in the cold. Europe will so far as we're talking about the European Union, I think that it's going to rapidly disintegrate. And when I say rapidly, I don't know if it's going to take 4 years or if it's going to take less or more. It's hard to say, but it's definitely heading into a perfect storm. So the European Union is probably in its death throes, which means also a collapse of the European Central Bank. It is, the whole euro, the whole, superstructure is going to crumble. Um, what other place did you ask me about other than Europe?
Just the rest of the West,
Canada. You
Canada,
mentioned
yeah,
Canada.
Canada, Australia,
Well,
etc.
Canada has a lot of natural resources. Canada can trade, but I think that Canada will be caught in the how do you call it, in the fault line between the United States and Europe. And I think that one thing that is intriguing me a lot is the growing rift between the United States and Britain. And I think that Trump's uh, signaling that, hey, maybe Canada can become 51st state of the United States, I wouldn't dismiss this as crazy talk. I think there's something to that. Canada is I think that it may be in the near future, we're going to see Canada partition and parts of Canada actually becoming absorbed into the United States, particularly, the western region. Um, One thing that my friend Sean Newman picked up on was that among the guests at Mar-a-Lago over the last couple of days, I think last week, was Danielle Smith. She's the premier of Alberta, and this is kind of unprecedented that a premier of Alberta goes and makes a personal visit to a president-elect of the United States. Uh, what did they talk about? We don't know, but um, who knows? Alberta is the first one that might become part of the United States, and Alberta is a very, very resource-rich region of Canada, and it's also a very libertarian region in the sense that
Mm.
people there are they're in oil services and they're in farming and they have cattle and they drill for oil. They go around in cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and like they're the closest Canadian equivalent to the red-blooded deplorable Americans. So that would be an easy match, and they don't necessarily like the whole wokery of Ottawa
Mm.
government and what do you call him? Justin Castro. No, Trudeau. Sorry.
Well, he might be replaced with someone even worse in the form of Mark Carney. Do you think Mark Carney has a chance of taking the role? And for those who may not know, Mark Carney is the former head of the Bank of Canada as well as the Bank of England, two big globalist institutions. What do you think of Canadian politics going on right now?
I think it's entirely possible because Mark Carney is Mr. World Economic Forum. I think what was his last assignment? Being a climate czar for the United Nations
Hmm.
after being a central banker. It's very strange how bankers are the ones that are most concerned about the climate. And Mark Carney is the guy who was basically laying it out
Well, I
and
mean, look,
saying,
they are about the green economy. It's just the green on the dollar bill.
well, yes, but this whole green economy is kind of like a nice wrapping on a completely dystopian agenda. And what Mark Carney was saying very arrogantly is that we're going to advance this agenda by basically allocating credit to those who are part of the solution and taking it away from those who are part of the problem or who are not part of the solution. Meaning, we're going to be allocating credit to, wind farms and solar farms and cricket and insect producing farms for the fodder for the masses, and we're going to be taking away from oil companies and miners and traditional farming uh, operations in Canada. No, not just in Canada, basically generally around the world and particularly in the West. Uh, could he become a Prime Minister of Canada? Of course, because Canada is still a British royal dependency. It looks like they're a sovereign country, but they're not really, because the Prime Minister is not really the head of Canadian government. There's a function there called the Governor General, I think.
Hmm.
The person is directly appointed by the king or
The
whoever, the
crown, they call
queen.
it. It's the institution of the monarchy.
Yes, exactly. And that person can overrule the prime minister, and they can veto the prime minister. And when prime minister is sworn in Canada, they pledge their allegiance to the crown, not to the Canadian
Hmm.
people that elected the prime minister.
Very
So it's a
interesting.
it's a it's a very, very strange place, and I think that it's altogether possible that in the near future, Canada will break apart, and the parts of Canada, if not all of it, become absorbed into the United States.
Is that why Elon Musk is attacking Keir Starmer? Is this part of the strategy to weaken but by weakening the UK, you effectively impact Canada's relations as well. Is this all connected in some sort of weird way?
Yeah, it is all connected in a weird way, and basically, I think that to understand the conflict, you have to kind of take the broadest possible context to it, and I think that the the way to do it is to go back to the way they describe the conflict. George Soros was explaining it as a conflict between two systems of governance in the world. So we're not talking about United States versus Canada versus Britain versus Russia, Middle East, Iranians, the Chinese. It's a what we're looking at basically is a global total war, but it's between two systems of governance.
Hmm.
That is, it's between the Western oligarchic imperialist system of governance versus everybody else. People like George Soros, they like to wrap it into this rhetoric about open societies versus closed societies, and others describe it as a conflict between democracies and autocracies. But it's actually between the oligarchic system of governance that is uh, what this rules-based order versus everybody else, whether they are democracies or autocracies or kingdoms or whatever. It's a war between these two systems, and this war isn't just against foreign countries; it's also against the domestic populations. And so I think that any government that doesn't want globalization and the global rules-based order and the penetration of their government by the Davos crowd, by Klaus Schwab and his minions, they're all on the wrong side of this. And I, what is quite clear is that the the strategic and philosophical headquarters of this oligarchic system of governance is in London. It's the London establishment. And so Elon Musk's attacks on Starmer, but not only, it, Elon Musk has been attacking the British establishment pretty much uh, on the whole, including Nigel Farage, who
Hmm.
appears to be in opposition, but I think that Nigel Farage is still a loyal captain of the City of London.
Wasn't he very cozy with the Queen when she was alive?
Uh, yeah, apparently he wasn't adversarial to the British royalty. So I think that with the Trump administration, the United States is kind of getting itself out of the clutches of this oligarchy, and it's abandoning the rules-based global order, which is, Davos is a debate club, but the real power still resides with the City of London. And we see, the more this juggernaut is unraveling now, the more we see the reality behind it. Because, the Starmer government, just before the elections in the United States, they were sending 100 um, Labor Party operatives to the United States to campaign in favor of Kamala Harris and against Trump, because they were desperate for Trump not to win the elections. And now we have this tug of war between uh, between who? Between, like, let's say, the Americans and the British for clearing of US Treasury futures, which
Mm.
is a very, very strange story, very obscure. But basically, there's a push to bring the clearing of American Treasury futures to London under the control of the Bank of England, which has never been done before, which is unprecedented, and no serious country has their sovereign debt cleared in a different country. It creates all kinds of problems, i.e., market manipulation, regulation, control in case of a crisis or a default, ability to manipulate prices, ability to manipulate interest rates, ability to uh, actually precipitate crises. And this all started happening since the day, and I credit Tom Luongo for even bringing this to my attention, since Jerome Powell at the Fed created the SOFR, instituted SOFR
Hmm.
as a replacement for LIBOR, because LIBOR is London Interbank uh, Offer Rate, which is the interest rate. So the price of money, even in the United States, was being set in London. And so Jay Powell said, no, why? It's going to be here. So he created SOFR. And then as a reaction, the Brits, with the help of some people in the United States, wanted to transfer the clearing of US treasuries to London. And they also tried to, this is just insanity, when you start tracing these threads, how everything is laid out. It's just insane. So one of the things that I've been looking at over the last few months is that I think that Great Britain is fiscally in a completely catastrophic situation. So part of the rules that they're trying to change, in addition to transferring the clearing of these of U.S. Treasury futures to London, is they're trying to enable the brokers and the clearinghouse to invest the collateral in the sovereign debt of Canada, Germany, France,
Mm.
and UK. Well, what we're talking about, this collateral, this is the margin capital that has to be held with the clearinghouse. So that's a small percentage of this market, except that this market is absolutely gargantuan. It's the world's biggest and most important market. It's $28 trillion inside. So this would enable the Brits to use this collateral and invest it in British sovereign debt. In other words, they will be able to fund the practically bankrupt British government uh, with the money of U.S. Treasury investors, with the margin accounts of U.S. Treasury investors, which is just I mean, the fact that they even try this is so brazen the only way they could get away with it is because the media is not even covering it. Nobody's talking about this. This has been, John Cornyn let it out, and then Dick Durbin has been on this a little bit, but it's a very obscure thing that is not at all being exposed to the American people. I have no idea. And it seems to me that the Trump administration is going to nip this in the bud, and it's not going to happen. And the Bank of England is sitting on losses of, I think, at least 150 billion pounds, which for Britain is
It's a
an
lot.
absurd amount of money.
Yeah.
And the way the British system works is that British Treasury, if if the Bank of England incurs losses, the British Treasury is supposed to reimburse them. Except that the British Treasury is broken as well, and the government's running budget deficits every year, and they're only growing bigger and bigger and bigger with time. And then at the same time, they're destroying their economy, so they're actually suffocating the economy so the tax receipts are going to go down. Anyway, I think that Britain is in a terminal mess. I think next few years is going to see um, an epic crisis in the United Kingdom, the kind of stuff that's going to be in history books. And I think that their hostility towards the Trump administration is going to be their doom because they're not going to find a friend in the United States anymore. And then a lot of people, not only in the United States, but also around the world, are going to smell blood. And when they smell blood, it's going to only accelerate the collapse of Britain, which, as it turns out, is still to a very large extent, dependent on their former colonial um, dependencies, especially in Africa. And now we see Trump invited Ibrahim Traore to his inauguration. So Trump is signaling support for anti-colonialist movements, which I think Britain is heading into a perfect storm, and it's going to get really, really ugly. And the only thing that I'm kind of sad about is that I don't see I don't see any pushback from the British people. It seems to me that they've practically given up. They're almost like passively awaiting their fate.
Yeah, there was a graphic the other day that I saw that showed inflows and outflows of millionaires across the world. Some of the biggest outflows of millionaires is the UK. Big money is leaving the UK. Now, some of the biggest recipients are the US, Canada, the UAE, countries like that. So it does appear to, much to your point, there is this big sucking sound that's coming out of the UK. And if you're British, it's not good. Well, Alex, this has been a fascinating interview. I want to get one more question in. This is from my Substack audience. If you want to ask a question to any of our future guests, then you can support us on Substack and get that privilege there as well. This is from CRK Texas. He wants to hear your thoughts on what the hell is up with all these Trump meme coins released right before the inauguration. You've got the Trump coin, now you've got the Melania coin. By the time this interview goes out, there may be another coin out there. What is the rationale behind this? I mean, Trump doesn't have any legal bills that he has to pay off anymore. He doesn't have any campaign funds that he needs to pay off before he gets into office. What's going on here?
I don't have an answer to that question. I honestly don't know. I know that the Bitcoin community is very, very skeptical about these coins. I mean, Trump apparently did make some money on these coins, but is there a plan? Is there an actual plan? Are these coins going to be in circulation? Are they going to be part of the US economy in some kind of a meaningful way, or is it just a scam? I mean, a scam, an approach to campaign donations, you know. It remains to be seen. I'm sorry that I can't give a better answer, but I genuinely just don't know yet.
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer in
I'll
and of
try to find
itself.
out.
Well, it's been a fascinating interview here, Alex. Anything else you want to talk about before we close things out?
No, not really. I mean, today is the inauguration day. I think that the reality of what starts to take place now will overwhelm. I mean, anything else I say, I only risk to make myself into a fool because I think that the reality is going to be so much more interesting that
Hmm.
even what we can anticipate. At any rate, what I do want to say is that I'm very optimistic about the reality. There's so many people out there who expect nothing, who think it's just going to be equally bad from today as it has been the past 4 years. I don't tend to agree with this at any rate, we'll see, but we're already seeing good things happen, and I don't think it'll take a lot, even if you put a cactus in the US in the Oval Office, it couldn't be worse than 4 years of Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean, my view, for whatever it's worth, is that we got to give him a chance.
No,
But
absolutely.
we have to be
No,
critical of him, but we have to at least give him the chance to do what he wants to do, and then we can assess the fruits of that tree once it manifests itself.
no, I think it's more than that. Not only give him a chance, but I think that the American people and everybody else, even people around the world, we shouldn't take the role of a spectator and now just say, okay, let's see what Trump's going to do. Because, in the same way that the American people they caused a turn in the American politics by putting Trump in the White House. They have to keep up the pressure. They have to make it known what they want. They need to, they need to be the agent driving the changes rather than saying, okay, so now Trump takes over. Let's see. Let's just
Yeah.
watch the pageant.
Use the
No,
art
I
of the
think that
deal against him. Use his maximum pressure campaign against him. Keep his feet on the fire, so to speak.
exactly. Hope for the best, but assume that your role is still essential. It's like elections every day. Don't let
Totally,
up.
totally. Where can people find you, Alex?
Well, people can find me on X. My handle is @nakedhedgy. I publish a daily newsletter on Substack, which is called iSystem Trend Compass for investors and traders. And I also publish a Substack for general interest called Alex Krainer's Substack. Only the the one for investors is daily. The personal one, the more general interest one, is uh, probably 4 or 5 articles a month.
I see. We'll have the links to your Substack here down below, Alex. So, guys, if you want to read more of Alex's work and hear more of Alex, check out his Substack down below. If you got value out of this video, kindly leave us a like and comment down below. Alex, go, Alex, go. If you disagreed with anything, however, let me know in the comments. I do read the comments. So, drop me your thoughts. Really interested to get your take. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. And also check us out on Substack so you can get early access and ad-free versions as well as uncensored versions of all of my videos whenever they warrant it. So with all that said, I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Bye, y'all.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.